February 1st meeting of the Planning Board from Westwood. First, we'll take a roll call or introduce board members and staff. Just raise your hand when I say your name, please. Ellen, Dave, Kate, and I'm Chris, and Tom McCusker is not here with us yet. We're hoping by the end of this, he will be. The meeting is recorded by Westwood Media Center and broadcast live on local cable television, Comcast Channel 12 and Verizon Channel 42. Meetings are also live on Westwood Media Center's YouTube channel. If you're having any trouble logging into Zoom, please go to zoom.us and click on Join Meeting and enter the meeting ID 850-7322-8148. We will begin the meeting with only board members and staff unmuted and on video. As the chair recognizes individuals to speak, we will unmute them. Board members may choose to mute themselves when they're not speaking in order to minimize background noise. For applications, the chair will first invite the applicant to address the board and give a presentation summarizing what is being requested. Board members receive the application materials prior to the meeting and will have reviewed them. Board members may ask questions during and following the presentation. Staff and outside experts will provide comments to the board. If the issue includes a public hearing, the board will then proceed to the public comment portion of the public hearing and will restate the instructions. In this remote meeting format, residents and guests may participate in several ways. Attendees should raise their hand and wait to be unmuted and recognized to speak over the Zoom meeting application or from a telephone dial-up. We will be able to hear you but not see you. Additionally, comments may be submitted by email or regular mail prior to the meeting. When we come to that part of the meeting, I will remind everyone of this process. Following public comment portion, the board will deliberate and make a decision to continue the public hearing to a specific future date. All remote meetings require that votes be taken by roll call. When a motion and a second has been made, the chair will ask if there's any further discussion before proceeding to a roll call vote, and then we'll restate the results of the vote. Looks like Tom has not joined us yet, but we do have a quorum. So Abby, I'll ask, have we had any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda.
Okay, so the first meeting is first agenda item is 20 Wildwood Drive, a earth material movement. This was continued from the last few meetings we've had. I don't know when they first presented, I can't recall that, but they're back with a revised site plan. And we have some responses from Beta and Conservation. So Abby, can you give us a rundown of what's happened since we last heard this applicant?
Yes. The public hearing was opened at your December 14th meeting. At that time, the planning board continued to your January 11th meeting because you had asked for a updated plan from a professional engineer to verify the walls and the slopes. On January 11th, that wasn't quite ready, so you continued to tonight. The applicant and the new project engineer is here tonight, and they have submitted a revised plan to you for this evening.
Okay. Abby, do we need to, we should inform the applicant that we are a board of 4 tonight? So does that alter?
Tom McCusker is just logging in. I was just sending him the passcode, so he will be here any moment.
Okay, well, let's wait for him to show up before we start the presentation. We could.
I could let you know that the Conservation Commission also approved this. Oh, here's Tom now. Okay. So Tom is coming in.
This is quite the entrance. Come on, Tom. I see his name. He's muted though.
Yes.
Hearn.
Okay. Am I late for the meeting? I thought it was at 7.
Yes, it is at 7. We did the opening remarks and now we're waiting for the first applicant.
Okay.
For it's the earth material movement that we have continued the last few meetings that we've had. So we did hear this before, and now they're back with a different site plan. So just to catch you up, Tom.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, applicant is here, so you may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dan Merrican with Legacy Engineering here on behalf of Mr. Chen. Mr. Chen appeared before you originally with a less detailed site plan. Beta reviewed it, generated some comments, and then Mr. Chen retained us to prepare this more detailed site plan for you. So we've submitted a couple of revisions addressing Beta's various comments, but the overall concept is not really different. The existing home is at the front of the property, down near the grade of Wildwood Drive, and then behind their house is a hill, basically. It goes up, and then it goes down to a wetland in the back of the property. And the applicant's really just looking to create a level yard area that they can enjoy. So we've prepared a detailed grading plan. The rear slope is going to be 2-to-1. It's going to be stabilized with erosion control blankets and seedings and plantings of shrubs. This area here will be surrounded by a fence, and it will be basically lawn and a patio. And then we have a construction entrance here on the left side of the driveway so that the vehicles can get in and out, and we have erosion controls around the entire perimeter of the work area. The net removal is about 350 cubic yards. Most of that will be rock, and that will be taken off-site. And we've indicated that the route will be Wildwood to Hartford to Route 109. And we have all the normal details: fences, walls, construction entrances, all the normal notes that go along with these plans. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about this.
All right, thank you. Comments, questions from board members for the applicant? Okay, don't see any board members. Abby, do you have anything further to add, or staff?
I don't have any other comments at this time, except for to follow up and let you know that the Conservation Commission, since your earlier hearing in December, they did go out and have a site visit, and they also approved this project at their meeting last week. So I believe this revised plan addresses all the staff comments and the comments received from Beta Group.
Okay. And this is, we will, do we have anyone in from the public with their hand raised?
I think Ellen has her hand. Ellen has her hand
Oh,
raised.
sorry. So many
Sorry.
people in here. Go ahead, Ellen.
Yeah, I know it's busy in here tonight. I just actually have a question for Mr. American, if that's okay.
Sure.
I know there had been at our previous meeting, we'd heard some concerns from abutters about water runoff, and I know obviously conservation addressed that, but I'm just curious, like I see you've made some changes. Obviously, in theory, it won't make the runoff worse, but would these changes potentially actually help improve the current situation with these regrades?
Yes. So presently, some of this runoff would shed towards the left on your plan. In the proposed regrading, everything basically is going to pitch back across a very shallowly sloped yard area, and then it would slope downhill towards the wetland area. So there wouldn't shed towards adjoining properties.
Excellent, because I think what I remember hearing from some abutters is that currently some abutters are getting water, so that if this is actually diverting it away and kind of improving the current situation, that's a value add as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, that's the case.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any other board members with comments or questions? So just, I had just a note. It looks like its street level is about 115 feet, And then to the back, the beginning, or is that the top of the wall or the beginning of the wall at 125?
So presently, streets at 115, 114. The house, the first floor of the house is around 120. So it's up 4 or 5 feet above the street. And then behind the house is a retaining wall that's 3 or 4 feet tall with a set of stairs. And that leads to an upper terraced area. And then above that, we're going to build another retaining wall that's 3 feet tall with a set of stairs, 2 sets of stairs. So the yard area will be at 128. So still quite a bit higher than the house, but it becomes a usable space. Right now, it's not a usable space. There are just too
Right.
many.
Okay, I was just noting for the record what the elevation changes are as you go back in the property. So about 128 will be the peak, so to speak, of the new
Correct.
backyard.
And that's about
8 feet higher
6
than
feet, 6 feet lower than the current peak back
oh,
there.
okay, right. Okay. All right. Still have seen no one in the audience raising their hands, looking to ask a question or make a comment. Give them a few more seconds. Abby, while we wait, do we have a standard conditions that we
Yeah.
need to read into the record?
There's
Yeah.
also a request for some waivers. It was
Oh,
for
right. Sorry.
waivers of the standard application material, for the standard EIDR application material, which is a waiver from the traffic report, the exterior lighting plan, the full drainage plan, and a presentation model.
Okay. So we would entertain a motion to accept the waiver request.
So moved.
So moved.
Oh, thank
Second.
you. We have a motion and a second to accept the waiver request. We'll do a roll call vote. Tom?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Ellen?
Hi.
Kate?
Aye.
I vote aye also. Okay. So would you like to read into the record the conditions?
Sure, I'll summarize the draft list of 10 conditions that I had also provided to the applicant and to the board members. They're fairly standard conditions. Number 1 is to protect the existing pavement on Wildwood Drive. Number 2 is that there should be no hazardous material used as part of the fill that's being brought in. The company where it's coming from should provide a certification to the town planner prior to any fill being brought to the site. Number 3 is listing the construction noise ordinance in Westwood. That is, no construction or site work should begin earlier than 7 a.m. or not after 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and then only between noon and 7 p.m. on Sundays. The 4th condition is all trucks carrying the earth material to and from the site should only come right from Hartford Street to 109. Number 5 is, I understand in response to your earlier hearing that you weren't going to be blasting, that you were going to be hammering out the ledge.
That is the
However,
applicant's plan.
is that right? Okay. I put in a suggested condition, if that were to change, if blasting was required, then you would need a permit from the fire department, and pre-blasting survey would be required of the surrounding properties. Number 6 is the applicant is responsible for submitting all of the required permits, either state or local. Number 7, if there's any changes requested or any field changes, those should be requested in writing to me and the building commissioner prior to implementation to determine what application process might be needed. Number 8 is the applicant is responsible for preparing any damage that may be caused to any of the public way. After consult with the Department of Public Works, a copy of the decision must be kept on site at all times. And the last one is that this is good for 2 years. If you need more time, for an extension should be requested prior to the expiration.
Okay, thank you. All right, we've heard from everyone, I think. Board members seem to have asked all their questions or made all their comments. So we've heard the conditions read. At this point, I would entertain a motion from a board member.
I will move to approve
Second.
the earth material movement subject to the conditions set forth by the town planner.
Second.
I'm trying to get better at this, Chris.
Like an Abbott and Costello act. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Ellen,
Aye.
Kate,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
and I vote aye as
Okay.
well. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for your application. Best of luck in your pursuit and hope it goes smooth.
Abby, do they have to vote to close the hearing?
Yes.
Yes. We do have to do that.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Any further discussion?
We nailed
Oh.
that, Ellen, by the way. We nailed it.
You did. Kate,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Ellen,
Aye.
I vote aye as well. This hearing is closed. Thank you again. Good luck.
Thanks. Thanks for your time
Thank
tonight.
you.
Have a good
Thank you,
night.
everyone. Yeah, goodbye.
All right. Abby, that's it, right? We can go home now or stay home? Next, we have discussion about our zoning amendment articles. We're opening this the first night of official public hearing. All right. How do you want to take these, Abby?
Right, so tonight is the start of your public hearing. This is, the official opening of your public hearing for all zoning amendments. The planning board has submitted 6 zoning amendments for annual town meeting. I can go through a presentation for each article. I recommend you take and discuss amongst yourself and take public comments one article at a time. I can pull that up. I know you have the written article in your package. It was also provided on the town's website and various locations on the planning division page. And I will share my screen in just a moment.
Yeah, I think one article at a time is the best way to make sure we don't gloss over something.
Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so the first article, the planning board's first article is proposed in response to a new state law aimed at promoting more multifamily housing production throughout the state. The idea is to have higher density housing within walking distance of public transportation. In 2020, summer of 2020, the governor and the state legislator did support and voted on, and it was enacted into law in early 2021. It's commonly, it involves changes to the State Zoning Act, which applies to all communities. The one that's most impactful to Westwood is commonly referred to as the MBTA Communities Law, because this new law requires all communities that have MBTA service to adopt one zoning district of a reasonable size that allows a minimum gross density of 15 units per acre of multifamily housing. Multifamily housing is defined as a building designed for 3 or more residents. It has to be within a half mile of a train station or bus stop. It has to also be suitable for families with children, so that generally means no age or bedroom restrictions in your zoning. And then the multifamily housing also cannot be discretionary. So you may have heard terms such as of right or by right housing. So that what that means, when a project is proposed, it can't be subject to a discretionary approval. So in December, right before the holidays, December 15th, the state issued draft guidelines that is more specific on what that original state law means. We only saw those few requirements, those 5 bullet points. The draft guidelines that were recently released by the state is still in draft form. They are taking public comments to the end of March, but they do state compliance will be required by the end of 2023. The final guidelines will be finalized later this year. They expect it to be summer 2022. And they also clearly spell out and define what reasonable size means, because the original legislation said a zoning district of a reasonable size. It wasn't really clear. We have been, the planning board had started looking at this and thinking about this and considering this new law over the last several months. We weren't sure exactly what that meant, but we found out when the guidelines came out in December. The reasonable size is defined by each community. It's a little bit different for each town, but for Westwood, it's specifically, they say it's a sort of formula approach. It's at least 50 acres total in land area, and it also has to have a total housing unit capacity. For Westwood, they have the state has designated Westwood a bus service community. And that means 20% of the housing stock has to be, excuse me, available for this multifamily housing. So it's based on the 2020 census data, 20% of our total housing units, the 5,801 equals 1,160 total housing units. So if we just are going off that minimum requirement of 15 units per acre, that amounts to a total acreage for this new zoning district to be 77 acres in size. So it's even larger than that. When I first read the guidelines, you see that it says the 50 acres, but then there's also another step that has to be added in, that you have to account for this housing density to be available.
Abby, I have a question.
Sure.
The 20% point comes in because we were designated a bus. Instead, we have one bus line through town, but we have 2 train lines through town, and they deemed us bus. So now we have this additional 20% category that we fit into, or is that,
Yeah.
Am I understanding that right?
You are, Mr. Chairman, and if you look at the definitions, the way the definition is written, I believe we're clearly a commuter rail community and not a bus stop community, which would lower the requirement for us. So that's something we're going to need to address in public comments.
Mhm.
Okay.
Right.
Just want to make sure I understood that correctly.
Spot on.
Right. So they are accepting comments till March. So later on in your agenda too, would get started on that. If we were designated commuter rail community, it drops down to 15% rather than the 20%. However, right now, Westwood is listed as a designated bus service community and subject to the 20%.
And in order for us to keep it around the 20, we would have to go up to like 21 units per acre, and that would drop it down somewhere in that area. So if
Right.
we zone something 21 units per acre instead of 15, then we could fall in that gets to like 51 acres or something like that. It'd be closer to the
Right.
50 acres. Okay.
Right. If 15 units allowed, the zoning or the state law says 15 units per acre is the minimum that has to be allowed by right. You
Right.
could, if you chose to, increase that density. If you did increase it to 20 units per acre, then that would drop down to a total acreage of 58 acres instead of the
58.
77.
Okay. All right. Just again, trying to understand everything in total.
Can I go back just the bottom of that slide, that bottom, I love the math at the bottom, Abby. Thank you so much for adding that. I would love for the labeling of the bottom line to be a little bit more clear. Like if we're saying 15 units per acre, can we literally spell that out? Because it confused me that it was like 15 acres equals 77 acres.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
thank
Forgot that. Yep. Sure. Okay.
but I really appreciate the math.
So right now, the planning board is proposing a zoning article, proposing a new overlay district. We're calling it the Mixed Use and Multifamily Residential Overlay District. The acronym is MUMFORD for short, but you've discussed it at the last recent meetings. You are proposing it on the Everett Street property. It's 2 parcels with an address of 22 Everett Street. It's highlighted here as an aerial view of both parcels. This is a view of the site. It's commonly referred to as the Foster Block site or the Tumble Bus site. It's the building next to the Progressive Building, and on the other side of Everett Street is Norwood, and there's a senior housing complex directly across the street. And then another location where you're proposing it on this new map is an overlay over the Gables residential apartment building at University Station, as well as over the existing condo development known as University Place that was designed by Pulte Homes. There's 2 buildings there that are already developed at a density that meets the minimum required at 15 units per acre. And they are within that half mile of the train station. So those are the 2 locations where you're proposing this new overlay district. And then there's also a new section 9.9 of the zoning bylaw. It's the Mixed Use and Multifamily Residential Overlay District. Now, it is written as the permit process is referred to as an EIDR, Environmental Impact Design Review. It is still considered a by right approval. However, it's not discretionary. Right now, most of all the multifamily that we have in town right now is through a special permit process. So the planning board is proposing to change that by creating this new overlay district and having this new environmental impact design review permit approval requirement. An EIDR is the most common application the planning board has. It's, as proposed, and it still involves a public hearing with the planning board along with the abutter notification. The proposed new bylaw is 16 pages long. It outlines the submittal requirements. It outlines the heights, the maximum height of 45 feet, the side and rear yard and front yard setbacks, parking requirements. It also includes for any proposals that are more than 8 units, 15% must be affordable. Also, any time a project proposes more than 8 units, 10% of those units are required to have at least 3 bedrooms to be consistent with the state law that for family supportive housing. This is a map that you had looked at earlier when you're trying to determine your locations. The red and the radius around it is the half mile from the train station. So this is around the Islington train station and around the University Station, University Ave 128 train station. The blue circles are a half mile radius of the bus stops on Washington Street.
Abby, did we get any guidance about the train stop in Dedham and whether we can apply that to us?
I don't have any specific guidance. If you recall, in December, you did submit your draft bylaw to the state. We did got confirmation yesterday that they received it, but they did not give us an official opinion on the full details of our zoning.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, if you look at the definition sections of the guidelines, it allows you to include commuter rail stations within a half a mile of a town. So I would argue that Dedham Station is something we could also use if needed.
Okay, thank you. And to my eye, it looks like the addition of the bus routes simply moves the area little left, is that west? It doesn't help so much north to south as the train almost extends all the way down to Everett Street and almost all the way up to the 128 area. So it might help a little bit for extending the range, or expanding, I should say. But it's just a notation there. Just extends farther westward to my eye.
So right now, your proposal is the proposed new section of the zoning bylaw and an overlay district, a new overlay district on the zoning map. The total acreage that you're proposing right now with these over these 3 properties is 16 acres total. So tonight we can hear from the board, you can discuss, you can also take public comment. You have tonight's hearing, you also have your next meeting where you could revisit the zoning further. And then usually your next meeting on February 15th is when you would make a recommendation to the FinCom. The public hearings with the Finance and Warrant Commission begin on March 1st. So tonight you can take a look. You have a draft zoning bylaw in front of you, as well as the map. And if you have any suggested changes, you could make those changes tonight or at your next meeting.
Abby, in reading what you submitted to us, last time we met, we were talking about 50 contiguous acres. And what I read, what you resubmitted to us, it didn't indicate anything about contiguous.
There was, in the more detailed guidelines, it did say it doesn't have to be fully contiguous, but they didn't want it to be less than 5 acres at a contiguous spot. So it could be separated out into different overlay districts at different locations, but not less than 5 acres.
So as many as 10 to get to the 50. In our case, we may have to get to the 77 based on how everything's playing out. Okay. Board members with questions, discussion topics, things we want to talk about with regard to the guidelines or how we'd like to proceed, if differently at all from how we've discussed this thus far. Kate, you had your hand up first.
Just curious, how many areas do we have that are less than 5 acres?
Pre-existing areas?
In our recommendation.
Well, I think the tumble bus is 6.5.
Right. The
And-
Everett Street property is 6.5, and the Gables is also 6.5. So the Pulte condos location is 2.7 acres.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Ellen, you had a question or a comment?
I just kind of wanted to just weigh in again on this. As far as proceeding differently, I don't have any desire to try and increase what we've already come up with yet. I maintain that the 77 acres is really an aggressive ask. And I don't think we're going to be the only community that is going to provide that as feedback to the state. So even 58 acres is a lot in a town our size to try and decide. Because again, potentially we're talking about it's multifamily by right, which could fundamentally change a whole lot of neighborhoods as far as density goes. So I think we have acted in good faith, as Kate said at our last meeting. I am still on board with proceeding with what we have, if anything, even though we know it's well below what the state has currently put in their guidelines. But I have a feeling that those guidelines, based on public comment and potential opposition from many communities that are being asked to do this, will change what that requirement is going to be. So I would not be in favor of trying to increase what we're already offering at this point in time.
All right, thank you. Any other comments from board members? If they want to move forward, as we've been saying? Yeah, Kate.
Yeah, I just wonder, do we bother including the Pulte if it's less than 5 contiguous? I mean, do we bother? I know it's to our advantage because it meets the requirement already, but if it doesn't really, if it's going to be set aside and not included in a total number.
Well,
Go
let
ahead.
me remind you, these are guidelines that are out there, and they are, and I, like Ms. Rawlings said, I believe they're going to be subject to change. So I would not recommend you pulling that out simply because you don't think it'll pass muster later on, because we don't know what muster is going to look like later on.
And this is exactly why we're having this conversation. I appreciate that point of view. Thank you. So my comment is withdrawn.
Okay, anyone else with? Okay. I do see there's a couple people in attendance with their hands raised. First one I see is Joseph Previtera. Hello, sir.
Sorry, I just unmuted him, I think.
I see him as muted now.
Him is muted as well.
How's that, Abby?
Oh, that's better.
Good, thanks. Thanks, Chris. Pat, I think you're taking the right tack on this with the train lines. And I have to tell you, I would be opposed to this if it includes the Foster Brothers property, simply because it was suggested before relocating the Islington train station, which I think would be terribly disruptive to people who bought homes to be close to that train station.
So I don't think that you're going to have to relocate the train station to get to Foster, because you've got the bus station right around the corner, well
Right.
within a half mile.
Right, and I'm not sure Chris picked up on that, but there's a bus stop right there, Chris.
Yeah, no, right under the bridge.
Right, okay,
Correct.
so,
Oh, I knew that.
okay, so relocating the Islington train station is not on the table.
No, that's not at all part of tonight's discussion or any discussion that I'm aware of.
Well, it was in the past, Chris, I just.
Yes, I understand.
You and I have
And-
discussed it, and I just want to make sure that Islington.
No, that's
didn't get
not
that
on the
piece of
table
train.
tonight.
Okay, great, thanks, Pat, thanks,
And-
Chris.
Joe, when it
Thank-
was brought up before, let me remind you, when it was brought up before, one of the staunchest opponent was the MBTA itself, because to move a train station is a tremendous undertaking. So they had no interest in moving it as well.
Okay.
So.
Thank you, Pat, thanks, folks.
You're welcome.
Okay, next person had their hand raised was Lou Rizzoli.
Okay, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, hi. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief. First of all, congratulations. You did a great job. I played a little minor role in this, and the planning board really went out of its way to do great jobs. We ought to be very thankful that we've had such a thoughtful presentation.
Thank you on behalf of all of us. Thank you.
And good luck at town meeting, Chris. And so I talked with our esteemed town council today, my dear friend Pat, and I totally agree with him. We are not, I think this one's really simple. We are not a bus service community. To be a bus service community, you have to have to apply to us, you have to have a bus stop and no train station. Well, we have 2 train stations, so that moves us down to commuter rail community, and gives us 15% instead of 20. So Abby did all the math, and I checked it. You did a good job, Abby. It brings us down from 1160 units to 762. And that's 398 less, and then it's 50.8 acres instead of 77. So I think we need to try to get that clear as soon as possible. And, you know, in my prior life, I was the chief counsel of the House of Representatives, so I dealt with all these state agencies. So I've known and worked with Pat over the years. So any help I can be to you, Pat, or any of the members of the board, I'm happy to be. So thank you.
Lou, thank you. Thank you for your assistance. You've always been a great counsel to me.
And
All right, thank
that's
you.
it.
Thank you, Lou. I appreciate your comments. Next hand that was raised was Gary Kaplan. I believe you're still muted, Mr. Kaplan. Abby,
Can you hear me now?
yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm Gary Kaplan. I live at 101 Magnolia Drive. And I also, like Lou, want to thank you for the fine job that you just did in presenting these options. So I'm a new member of the Westwood Affordable Housing Association. And, you know, I'm one of the people who are here tonight to provide strong support for a Mumford district. The district, of course, would enable young families with children and other families to participate in all the opportunities of being a Westwood family via affordable multifamily housing. Many of us here have experienced excellent opportunities, great public schools, good housing, transportation to Greater Boston. Units like this can enable new families to have such affordable opportunities themselves that many of us have enjoyed. It will go a long way in making Westwood even more of a thriving, diverse community. And that's my only comments, and I thank you for your attention.
All right, well, thank you very much for your comments. Next hand I saw raised was Trevor Lobenstein.
Hi, folks. How are you all doing tonight?
Very well, Trevor. Thank you.
Good. Good. Well, yes, I guess I'll also thank you for your presentation tonight. And I had a couple of thoughts that I wanted to share. One, I guess, is piggybacking on the prior comments regarding affordable housing, but also housing, more affordable housing that's available to seniors who want to stay in Westwood. I know it's a need that is comes up repeatedly in almost every forum in town. Some development like this could provide smaller scale, sort of lower overhead housing for not just families, but also families looking to move in, but families older families looking to stay, who might be looking to downsize. So I think that's an important consideration to keep in mind. My second thought was that I guess maybe I don't understand the rules coming from the state as well as Abby, obviously, but is there no reason why would we not set aside more acreage at either location we're talking about to get closer to the threshold of 50? For instance, I'm thinking in the Tumblebus site, would there be any reason to stretch the border maybe to the west side of the train tracks to encompass the areas, I guess, to the south of like Roach Brothers, that kind of no man's land of development that's there? If not simply just to put more acres on the board, so to speak. And similarly down by University Station, why wouldn't you make that bigger? I mean, just to appease the sort of the limits that are coming from the state. So those are my two thoughts / comments.
Thank you. Well, to answer your first question, the spots on Washington Street south of Roach Brothers have been discussed at length, and we've decided not to. It really doesn't amount to much. It's about 1.5 acres, and it would be a separate site. So it is separated basically from the Tumblebus location. So it would be our smallest parcel, and it wouldn't really amount to much of an area, an acreage add. And I did bring up the question about adding all of University Station or a part of it to get up to that number. And I think it's important that we identify that at this point in time, that number is not yet set in stone. And I believe that will be set, or the number will be set in stone this summer, right, Abby? Summer of 22 is when we're expecting that. So to go ahead and designate what would be a lot of our commercial base to this, where it could be built in parking lots or whatever. I don't know. It could open up a big can of worms, but at the very base of it, we would be developing a lot of our newly developed commercial tax base down there. So we didn't see it as a total gain. We're trying to walk a tightrope here of a residential community with a very fine line tax base with a split tax rate that seems to be always walking a tightrope. So there's a lot of things in play here for a town like Westwood. So we're trying to do the best we can to comply with the law that has been handed down to us. And we're doing our best on this first go around to come up with what we think is an honest attempt at complying with the law, and in a way that helps our community and helps with the diversity of housing, as we've been asked to do, to develop this diverse housing. So I hope that kind of answers your question, Trevor, but there's no simple answer. We're just kind of doing what we think is right without biting off more than we can chew here. And if they require us to go up to 50, otherwise we're not in compliance, then we're going to have to come back and give it a try again and come up with more. But at the very least, this process has allowed this board to identify that these 16 acres we think are the best suitable acres for this. So at the worst of it, we need to identify 34 more acres. But I think right now we all agree this is the best 16 to start with. So I don't mean to speak for everyone, but that's been our collective voice. So I'm just trying to reiterate that. Ellen, yes.
Do you mind if I piggyback on what you were saying? Do you mind if I add?
No, go ahead.
Hi, Trevor. Your point about senior housing, I absolutely agree with you. That's something that I think has been discussed a lot, and there's a lot of support for that. Just to be clear, this particular legislation specifically states we cannot age restrict. We cannot impose age restrictions because the goal of this particular initiative is family-friendly housing. So I'm all for, trying to expand our senior citizen housing stock for affordable housing, but that's a separate initiative that I think we should prioritize. But unfortunately, we can't outright address that as part of this work that we're doing for this. My other thought on, offering up all of University Station, we've had conversations about the fact that, because most of University Station in that commercial area that we're talking about perhaps offering is developed, it's not likely that within the next decade or so that someone would bulldoze all of that and build multifamily housing. Part of these guidelines also state, at least today, unless it changes, the compliance is conditional and it's only good for about a decade. And then the state will be looking at whether or not anything has been developed in the areas we've zoned. On the one hand, they say there's no requirement for us to meet that number of units, but then a few paragraphs later, they're going to be looking and see if things get built. And if housing hasn't been developed in the areas that we've zoned, they're going to be asking us why. And that's in the guidelines that they've released. So I think that's a concern that this board has as well, that, do we want to set ourselves up to be looked at in a decade as, well, now you're not compliant anymore because you picked zones where nobody can build anything. So it's a very delicate balance, and that part of the guidelines may change. Again, we'll know better when it's all finalized, but those are some things that had come up in previous discussions as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Dave.
Yeah, just to add a little bit more, I think it's really important that we have a process that we followed here, that we came to a consensus over some locations, and that we establish the way we're going to do this is through the EIDR process. You know, like it's not just saying, okay, we're going to have by right housing and all. We've come up with a thoughtful proposal that provides for affordable housing. It imposes some requirements for affordable housing. It uses this EIDR approach to, while still allowing it to be not discretionary, it built in some of the needs or some of the requirements what we wanted to make sure, for example, that the affordable housing was an element of this, that it wasn't simply, okay, it's multifamily, no restrictions or whatever. So I think that establishing that process and our own review process is a very important part of this. And so I can see where it would make a lot of sense if someone told us you absolutely positively have to be 58 or 77 acres, then you can expand from this. But I think that if that's the only issue, if it turns out, okay, everything else is great, but the size is not, it's not a large enough area, then we will have accomplished a great deal and we'll have a good place to work from and to have a further discussion on things that are, that where it becomes that you have to do it. A lot of our discussion, you saw people were asking us, well, do you really have to do this? Do you really have to do that? And we were working with a lot of ambiguity. So here we have a good starting point or a good base process. And let's put that out there. Let's get a lot more public feedback here. And then let's see where this goes. So I think we're doing the right thing.
Yes, Kate.
Yeah, and I'd love to just piggyback on what Dave just said and what others have said just about this process, because we're starting with what we believe are the best locations initially. We'll get to see what other communities are coming up with, how their plans are working out, how the state's responding to them. So we can influence design a little bit more and usage as we go forward. And like Dave said, to continue to review. Like we have a really good process here that's been established. Everyone's well-intentioned and intending to comply. So that's why we're starting small, because we're starting really well. And we're going to continue to review with a process so that we do the best we can for the residents of Westwood.
Trevor, did we answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. That was very helpful. I guess, yeah, my only other thought was, on the senior housing component, I wasn't even thinking about an age restricted, but just more a pure, variety of housing options kind of perspective, I think, from an age side. So anyway, but that's great. Thanks so much for those responses, and good luck.
Thank you very much. We did have, looking at timestamp, Jackie Kay of 22 Redwood Road. She wrote in, for the record, if we do not do this, what happens? Is there a fine or do we just lose grant money? So grant money is certainly a part of it. But if we don't do this, then we don't comply and we're ignoring the state law. What's the penalty for that? Well, the first part is the fines. I'm sorry, the grant money will not be accessible to the town of Westwood. And I believe we have utilized at least one of the grants that would be withheld in the future. But just because we haven't utilized the other grants in the past doesn't mean we won't need them or access to them in the future. But then there's the other unintended consequence to us is if we're not zoned for it, then we don't have any real control after 2023 as to where someone may come in and say, I want to build a by right multifamily. You were supposed to have zoned for it. Where can I build? And if we can't point them in a direction, then I think they're looking at possibly any any half mile, any property within a half mile of a train station or a bus stop. Would that be correct, Mr. Ahern? They could at least make the argument that they could build anywhere if we don't designate a spot. Arguable. I'm not saying they're going to come do it. I'm just saying it's similar to the arguments that's been made in the past at other zoning.
This is a very fluid situation. We don't even have firm guidelines that we're trying to hit right now, let alone what the penalties might be in the future if there's extreme resistance to this. So there are a variety of things that could occur. What you mentioned could occur. I think that would be a little bit further down the road, but it's not,
Sure.
not out of the question. And what I think we want to do as a community is have a reasonable defensive position. And I think what you propose gives us a reasonable defensive position against any kind of intrusion a developer may seek to use to their advantage.
All right. Yes, Tom.
Well, in my view, this is a very poorly drafted piece of legislation. It was done solely so the legislature could say, we are taking care of this, and then throwing it into the town's lap to carry it out with very, very vague guidelines and recommendations. So I think our approach is right on, and we should continue with it and push this article through town meeting and do no more than that.
All right. Thank you, Tom. The next person I saw that entered a question and raised her hand was Barbara Shea.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, you can hear me.
Yes.
I don't disagree with what anyone has said so far about presenting what you've just presented, but I wanted to suggest, since Roach Brothers is highly unlikely to change, but perhaps might leave Islington, that's just shy of a 5-acre parcel. It's 4.99 acres, and it is on the train line. So, and it is adjacent to that area that Trevor mentioned, that little triangular area that goes down to the corner underneath the bridge. So I don't know if we needed to add to the 16 acres you're already proposing. Just wanted to throw that out there, that maybe as an overlay district, that's another chunk of land that if we needed to add to our
Right.
pile of acres.
Yeah, and many other parcels have come up in our discussions in addition to Roach Brothers. We made the conscious decision to kind of stop where we did. We thought it was the right initial fit for the town to move forward. I think we all kind of acknowledge that if we just keep piecing parcels together to try to achieve 50, we're going to migrate into an area that we're not comfortable with, because every parcel has a whole different set of challenges with it. And so I think myself, I agree with Tom and his suggestion that we stick to our plan and try to execute through town meeting. And then if we need to regroup after the summer guidelines are set in stone this summer, then we'll do that. We'll pivot, we'll adjust, and we'll do what we need to do. But as Kate mentioned, we have established a really nice set of guidelines and processes that this board or the next iteration of the planning board can execute with going forward if need be.
I'm not disagreeing at all. I agree completely. And I just wanted to throw that out there. And in fact, as it happens, both commuter lines and the bus are all on the Islington side of town, which feels like the side of town that tends to get dumped on with different things that people in the area don't like. But the redevelopment is so beautiful of Islington Center. And I think a lot of people who live in this area, including myself, have been happy about that. And hopefully it wouldn't turn into a big fight at town meeting. So I'm not suggesting you add it. I'm just saying, if I'm not at the meeting next time and you need to come up with another 5 acres, there it is as a possible overlay.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your comments. The next person I saw with a question was Fran Fusco of 20 Pine Lane. And her question is, has anyone involved the school committee in these talks? The potential development could cripple our school system, put stress on our water resources, police, and fire. Abby, has any discussion been had with any representative from the school committee?
No, not specifically. Right now, we're talking about zoning, so no specific project is proposed. When when a project is proposed, we would communicate with the school department. However, we're talking about zoning right now, so no one can expect, give definitive answers. Also, because this state law requires the multifamily housing as a by right approval, there really isn't, you don't have, as much discretionary review. You can't ask as much information. For special permits, which we've done in the past, where you can make reasonable conditions that are related. However, you don't have that same level of scrutiny and that same level of review with a by right EIDR approval. So you can't require applicants to provide fiscal increased payments for school children with this kind of development.
So the most we can do is give them a heads up. There may be more students coming our way. We don't know how much because there's no development proposed yet. And even if we do have a proposed development, it's a guesstimate as to how many students would be part of that. So next was, Jackie K. She typed, "Thank you for the answer. I have a follow-up. If it's just the grant, how much is the grant money and how often are we getting those grants? Would those grants outweigh the costs incurred by the yearly cost for police, fire, schools, etc.? And could we build our own low-income housing?" Excuse me. And then she said, sorry, affordable housing. If it's just the grant, how much is the grant money? I don't know what the cap to the grant would be for all three or for the one that we've done in the past. I don't have a clue as to what that is. Would they outweigh the cost incurred yearly by the police, fire, schools? Again, we don't know those numbers because there's no development proposed. So, and I guess the last question she asked is, could we build our own affordable housing? So we do have affordable components to our special permit applications, but by right subdivisions don't have an affordable component to them. So we're not building our own. We're not, the town of Westwood is not in the landlord business. It's not in the real estate ownership business. As far as I know, Pat, you might have different knowledge.
Waha has a number of affordable units, but Waha is a separate entity from the town.
Okay. I was thinking town when I was speaking, so I wasn't thinking of Waha.
So could at some point in time the town want to invest in an affordable housing? I guess the town could if it could figure out a way to manage it, but that's not going to comply with this law. So they're not going to, I don't see them giving us a pass on multifamily by right if we were able to develop, 50 units of affordable housing somewhere. So it's just not gonna, we're not gonna get a pass on that, that I can see for this law.
Any board members with a comment on this question? Yes, Kate.
Oh,
or whatever you'd like to say.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
sorry. Just I wanted to just address Ms. Fusco's suggestion that that we could be crippling the school system with this. And I just wanted to highlight that's I don't believe that that's a technical term, a legal that doesn't help in our evaluations. I don't think that anything the planning board can do can cripple the school system. So I just want to throw that out there to just be a little bit more careful with the way that we respond to that idea of crippling the school system. I think that would make a lot of people get on high alert, and that's not really necessary.
On that topic, she does have a follow-up, so I'll read that now. We need to know what dollars in grant money we're talking about. Do you realize it costs $20,000 a year to educate one child in Westwood and more to educate a child with special needs? This could outweigh any grants the town may get. So it sounds like she's saying complying with the law is optional, and that if it doesn't make financial sense, then we should ignore the law. Maybe I'm putting words in her mouth, but that's kind of how I read that comment.
And so say, you know, that's not what I'm thinking about as I'm reviewing what the law is asking us to do. I have full confidence in our school system in Westwood and our town to adapt to its changes over time.
Any other comments from board members responding to the latest comment made?
Or,
Yes, Debbie.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add, I mean, the law specifically mentions 3 grants that will, if a community is not in compliance, there's 3 specific grants that we could not be eligible to even apply for grants. However, they also have language in there that says compliance can be considered in all grants. So other grants that aren't even listed. Typically, when the town applies for grants, we've notably received a lot recently. Our town's energy manager has submitted a lot of grants, and one of the bonuses of that gains points to help us get these grant awards is if you're in compliance with state goals among the state. So things such as we've received funds that go towards renewable energy sources, solar panels. We've had a lot of complete streets works projects, sidewalk improvements in town. And as part of those grant applications, the state asks for things like if we have a current up-to-date master plan, the comprehensive plan, housing production plan. So they look at, climate action, hazardous plans. There's a number of criteria that helps make us more competitive in that grant process.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Chris, this is Nora Loughnane. Just
Oh,
one other
hi, Nora.
point I wanted to add. I can't speak to all the different grant programs, but I know that we did receive a MassWorks grant for $5.5 million for work for the University Avenue Canton Street intersection. That was several years ago. There are many MassWorks programs that have gone through since then, and the town DPW is always looking to apply for MassWorks funds. Those are very large grants.
Okay, I think that's the first number I've heard attributed to a grant, and it wasn't a small number either. Okay, I don't see any other questions in the Q&A, and I don't see any other people with hands raised. Oh, no, we do have one other one. Sorry, I just came in. Jamie Allen of 530 Pond Street wrote, I know a Westwood resident who filed a request. I don't know if that's a typo or an acronym. And we actually lost the equivalent of a smaller elementary school in terms of student population. Again, that's an elementary school. I don't know, FOIA?
The Freedom of Information Act.
Thank you. Oh, I'm not even, my mind is not there. Thank you. A Westwood resident who filed a Freedom of Information request, and we actually lost the equivalent of a small, I'm not sure how that relates to this particular zoning discussion. Can anyone clue me in how that might relate?
I wonder if that person might be suggesting that the town could absorb new students because our population is down so low comparatively. That might be what they're saying, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Thank you. That's, I think, a good interpretation. I don't know if it's accurate, but I'll go with it. Okay. I don't see any other questions. I think we've given ample time for people to raise their hand or type in a question. Any board members with final thoughts, going forward on this particular article? And we're not done with it. We're going to revisit it in a couple of weeks. So that's fine. Oh, I think we have one more just typed in. Yes, Jamie Allen has said, that is what I'm saying. So nice job, Kate, deciphering that. My mind was going somewhere else. So, okay. So I think we are going to move on to Article 2. Abby, unless there's something else you want to.
I just wanted to add one more comment. I circulated the draft zoning also to the building commissioner, and he suggested adding a definition for institutional uses because we had mentioned that in our zoning bylaw without including a definition. So in your draft that I uploaded yesterday, if you had a chance to look at it, I had added a definition for institutional use to be a nonprofit or quasi-public institution, such as a church, religious organization, library, public or private school, educational use, child care use, or government use for public purpose. To add to your draft bylaw.
Okay. If you haven't had a chance to review that, look it over and we can discuss that longer next time we meet. So anything else, Article 1? Multifamily. Okay. So Abby, we want to move on to Article 2?
Article 2 is, can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, so Article 2 is the permitting for the solar arrays. This section, your proposal includes adding a new section 7.7 in the zoning bylaw related to the design review process for solar. And the proposed changes are the purpose of these changes is to be more consistent with the state law. So giving solar more protection from being overly or unreasonably regulated in Westwood or in all towns. Right now and currently as proposed, all solar proposed on a structure doesn't need any board approval, goes straight to building and electrical permits. And then as proposed, the change would be if it's not on a structure, that would be the ones that are mounted on the ground or on a over those you see them over the carports, or similar to what you have at the Eversource property. If it's not on a structure, as proposed, it would be an administrative review process with me, the town planner, administrative EIDR process, and that would be reviewed prior to a building and electrical permit. Currently, right now, ground-mounted solar requires a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. However, this draft proposes changes that and eliminates that Zoning Board of Approval process and goes straight to the town staff approval process. It also includes new guidelines for heights. It sets a maximum height for the ground-mounted structures to be more. Right now in your draft, your first draft had recommended 20 feet maximum height. However, I did circulate that to the building department, and they suggested increasing that a little bit more to 25 feet. We took a closer look at the structures that are proposed over the parking areas at Eversource and realized the highest point there is at 22 feet. So they recommended you update your draft to include the 25 feet just to be safe. That's a pretty standard size structure there. And then also the fire department reviewed the zoning and they recommended for the commercial, the solar that are over the commercial parking lots have a minimum of 14 feet clearance. That way, if they had an emergency where they had to get to an individual, they could get their trucks under there. So they recommend including a minimum of 14 feet. And then this proposed zoning, it has as a new definition for large scale solar, and that would require a public hearing, environmental impact design review application and public hearing with the planning board. So that would come before this board to get their review and their approval completed before getting the building electrical permit. It also includes a new definition for large scale, meaning solar that's not proposed on a structure, it's not mounted on the roof, and that it occupies more than 10,000 square feet or over the 250 kilowatts, which for those that don't know, 250 kilowatts is really big. It's much bigger than what would be provided at a single residential property. It's much more at a commercial scale. So either a principal use or a large scale commercial project. For example, the structures at that Eversource property on Station Drive, that would be considered large scale, both the square footage and the size. So in the images below, the one proposed on the roof of a house that goes same as today would go straight to building electrical permits. The photo in the middle is, a small ground mounted structure, what you would see on a residential property, that would go to an administrative approval by the town planner. I would review it for compliance with these new draft guidelines, which also includes a 25-foot setback from the front yard, from the front property line. And then there is language in there that screening may be required, such as landscaping to help screen the view to neighbors. And then it would need that prior to getting the building electrical permit. And then the photo on the right is one of these large scale solar farms. What they're referred to, that would require a application and public hearing process with the planning board, and that would include the full abutter notification. So any further questions on this? This is the draft that you have in front of you. And then also you just had a couple editing comments in your draft yesterday from the fire department and the building commissioner.
Yes, Ellen.
I wanted to report back. I attended the most recent WEAC meeting and had provided them an update on where we were at with this, excuse me, with this zoning article. And there was a couple of pieces of feedback that I just wanted to kind of bring up in this forum. The first question was for its section 7.7.13 about the maintenance plan, the operation and maintenance plan. The question was, will that be required for smaller, or would that only be for the larger scale? And if it's for the larger scale, which seemed more appropriate, we should specify that just so that it's defined clearly in the bylaw.
Okay, I believe the intent was only for the large scale principal uses and large scale, but we can add language in that specific section to make that clear.
Excellent. Just because I agree, it doesn't necessarily make sense for an individual ground mounted in someone's backyard to have the operations and maintenance plan submitted to the planning board. And the other question that came up as part of the discussion was about the logic behind how we landed on the 250 kilowatts, and why do we as a board, do we need to specify that? Because currently you couldn't really build something more than 10,000 square feet that would generate more than that. But the comment was that the technology is changing quickly, and at some point in the not too distant future, that could be possible. And do we as a board, do we care about that, or are we really just caring about like the physical size? So do we need to specify the wattage, or is just specifying more than 10,000 square feet sufficient?
Yeah, Ellen, I was in reading that, I thought the exact same thing. Our concern seems more to be of the physical, how much space is this taking up? In 10 years from now, the planning board shouldn't have to revisit, because now solar developers are hampered because technology could put 250 in 100 square feet. Then they'll have to go back and rewrite the bylaw. And I don't think the restriction intention is the wattage. It's the size, the physical size, I think, is more the concern. I don't know how other board members feel about that, but that was a question I had in reading what Abby had submitted to us. I think seeing it written out like that kind of crystallized it for me, and it made me wonder. Any other
Right,
board
and
members?
I
thoughts?
can just respond to where we came up with the 250 kilowatts. A lot of applications that we receive for solar, the way the applications come in, a lot of times they reference the wattage rather than the size. And then 500 kilowatts is what is the total size of the solar array on the roof at Target. It covers the whole roof. So I just kind of took half of that. It would be the 250 kilowatts. And, it is greater, that location is greater than 10,000 square feet. But I figured if you're using that, measurement, it is clear that that is a large, a large system. It's more than that would power just one house.
But to the earlier point, it exceeds the 10,000, right? So that would trigger it right there. It would be considered large. But in the future, I mean, if it's 12,000, it could generate 1,000. I don't know. I'm curious how board members see this and what our responsibility is. Is it the physical size of the solar arrays or the amount of power it generates or stores? What do you think our thoughts should be on this?
I
Or
think
leave it as
it's,
is?
I think it's the size, the physical size. And I would suggest, I would agree to take out the wattage because actually before the current bylaws, it used to be based on wattage as well. There used to be kind of a large versus small, and it was based on like 10 or 20 kilowatts or something like that. And we, at the time, when we changed the bylaws to what they are now, the argument was, we're kind of locked in to this number and the technology will change. So I think if our only consideration is really the size of the project, then it really we shouldn't lock ourselves in, because we'll have to come back and we'll be changing the numbers around again later.
Anyone else with thoughts on this? Yes, Kate.
So I agree that we can just take the wattage out, but I do want to also just mention, maybe this is the pandemic talking, or I'm just getting old, but I am getting old, but Dave and Ellen both said current and currently, and I laughed really hard because we're talking about electricity. And so I just wanted to share, I'm kind of cracking up over here. So my life is very small, and I'm glad to be on the planning board. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, now we're done with the pun section of the evening. Tom, did you have any thoughts on the topic?
I agree with David.
Okay, thank you. Ellen?
Yeah, just in case it wasn't clear, I know I presented it as feedback from WEAC, which it was, and very good feedback. I support that as well. It got me thinking as well, do we care about what it's generating, or is our purview as a board really about the dimensions? And I came down on the side of, our purview as a board is really about the physical size and that, the details that are part of that. I think that's our threshold. I support removing the generation part of it from the bylaw.
Yeah, if I wasn't clear, I would too. I would agree with that. Okay. I believe we have a hand raised, Barbara Shea. Moving on to public comment. Yes, Barbara?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, can you identify yourself, please?
I'm Barbara Shea. I live at 14 Cardinal Drive. Actually, I didn't say that last time.
Right. That's
So I agree with taking out the wattage, and I wonder, because I didn't see anywhere in this about what benefit to the town is accrued by the addition of the solar panels by whomever does it, whether it's this company that was proposed before to put where now the Hanlon School is going, and that got removed. if some company comes in and wants to put solar panels and say, we won't charge you anything, Westwood, but we'll put it there and you could generate power. I've just seen a lot as a residential real estate salesperson, not a lot, but several contracts where the solar company says, yeah, we'll lease to you for free. We'll put on solar panels on your roof. Won't charge you anything, but the power that's generated goes to us and you get some small benefit. I just wonder if is it within the purview of the planning board to have some minimum return to, if this is, I presume, for possibly on town land, town buildings that could benefit the town. Am I wrong on that?
So you're talking about leasing space out for solar arrays?
I'm talking about any requirement that there be a certain level of return to the town for clear cutting some piece of land in order to put these solar panels or putting them on a municipal building by a company, because different companies have different contracts that they say we'll give you X, and some might have more beneficial ones. That might not be within the purview of the planning board, but I'm just suggesting that maybe the return to the town or whomever is putting up these solar panels might be something worth considering.
Mr. Chairman, can I address that?
Yes, please.
So Barbara, I think what you're talking about is really under the purview of the town's energy manager. Anytime Tom Philbin gets involved in one of those things, he does a thorough evaluation and a cost benefit analysis of what the program is and what the benefit to the town is and what the potential detriment is. So
Okay.
I don't see that as a zoning. I see that more as a management issue within the town's energy management position.
Thank you, Pat. So my other question related to that just came into my mind, but it looks to me like the changes to the zoning is you're removing that ground mounted, changing it to other, and saying that no longer is it a Board of Appeals issue, but it's yes by right in all zones, that smaller scale, other, and larger scale, or am I not reading this correctly? You're removing any restrictions on the placement of solar anywhere.
Yeah, well, what we're doing is what the state asked us to do.
Okay.
So the state wants to make it basically easier for a property owner to establish solar. And so that's essentially what this is doing. And Abby would be the board administering this, basically, and from an administrative review perspective for the ground mounted solars.
Okay. And one other question I had was 7.7.8 on the lot coverage. It isn't making sense to me, but maybe it's because it's past my bedtime. Ground mounted solar energy systems shall not be included in the calculations for the lot coverage or impervious cover as defined in section 2.0, which I didn't go back to read, but what does that mean? Ground mounted solar energy systems shall not be included.
Can you address that?
Yeah, in our zoning bylaw, we have a maximum lot coverage.
Right.
But what we're saying here is that the ones that are on the ground don't fall into that. They're not usually completely on the ground. They're usually up a little bit. They might be angled to get the sun. So they're not technically an impervious surface. So the town zoning usually looks at that as more of an impervious surface, such as where structures are placed, structures or paved areas. And so what we're saying here is that the solar panels are up a little bit off the ground. They're not secured directly into the ground.
But not more than 20 feet high if they're on the ground. And there are setback requirements, right? So to me, I was reading this lot coverage to me, and you can fill your whole lot because it's not sitting on the ground and becoming impervious. But that's subject to other restrictions. Is that correct? That's not broadening the.
Well, as written, it could cover a good portion of your of your lot if you wanted to with the solar.
If I wanted to cover my whole front yard right out to the street, I can do that?
As long as you follow the setbacks, which they has,
That's what I was
yeah.
asking. Okay, so the setbacks
Setbacks.
apply. This is just a separate issue that to me sounds really unclear, but I guess within the context of the rest of the requirements.
Abby, we said 25 feet from the street for all properties in town, regardless of where your front door is, or from the road or whatever. And beyond that, it's the same setbacks as accessory buildings or detached buildings.
Yes.
So whatever the zoning is for that particular address for detached buildings, the same setback would apply, Barbara, to a solar.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Sure. Next question I saw was typed in by Chris Pareda of 155 Willard Circle. He said on Article 2, why not let the administrative process, i.e. the town planner, use discretion to decide which solar projects need a planning board hearing instead of stating area or wattage? And I believe following the advice of counsel, we are following more of a formulaic approach to that decision instead of a subjective approach by one person, the town planner. Is that right, Pat? And that's why we're proceeding in this manner? That
the state is really
position.
The state close enough for government work. The state is really limited what we can do in terms of restricting solar. It's, and I can't quote it ever when I need to, but it's public health, safety, and there's one other thing. And it's a matter of right to be able to do solar, except for those three things. And I'm sorry, I can't remember what the third one is off the top of my head. But
Okay.
Yes.
I
Meandering answer, and I apologize.
I think that addresses his question as to why it would not solely lie in the town planner's discretion.
Correct.
Next, we have a hand raised from Claire Galkowski. We can allow
She
her.
should know the third one. I don't remember it.
Maybe we'll hear it now.
Public welfare.
Thank you.
Yes. Abby beat her to the punch. Hello, Claire.
Hello, thank you for discussing this. Yes, it is public welfare, you're right. And similar to the previous article that's being proposed, this you kind of referred to it, but you didn't state it. This is to bring us into compliance with state law. The town would be open to a lawsuit if it denied a permit to build that was considered overly restrictive by the state. So that's another way of looking at this question. I also wanted to point out that this isn't just about ground mounts. Currently, the bylaw only allows roof mounts on the principal building, like if your house. It can, if you have a shed out back, you have to go to zoning right now. If you are building a carport, as we are planning to do, we have to go to zoning to just put a few solar panels on a carport. There are other applications too that are quite lovely. You could put them on a pergola instead of a roof, a cabana, a shed. You could make an awning with solar panels, and they can be quite lovely. I think WEAC will. I will encourage WEAC to produce some pictures. We actually have a collection of pictures of applications like that to just show what the possibilities are for this type of thing. So it isn't just about the ground mounts, but there are so many other creative ways that we can incorporate this zero emission electricity generating supply. So that's all. I just wanted to make those comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The next hand raised was from Donna Morrison.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was
You just
trying
cut her off?
to. Oh, I'm sorry. Where'd you go?
No, she's back. She's
Okay.
back.
I'm
Donna?
sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry
I'm
about that. Can you state your name and
Yes,
identify?
Donna Morrison, 303 Oak Street. I did tune in late, I'm sorry. I just want to caution you, as you write this bylaw, people who may be interested in placing several solar panels on their land might clear cut as I hear this discussion, they can place as many panels as they want, from what I heard you say, on their land, as long as it doesn't exceed the current bylaws for the setbacks. So they might take, if they have woods in their backyard, they might clear cut their woods to put in solar panels. So I caution you to write the bylaw so that we don't end up losing our wooded areas that are in town. We don't want to cut down woods to put a school in the woods. We don't want to lose more wooded areas to provide energy from solar that we're already getting from the sun. The trees are very important to our energy process already. And that's all I just wanted to say. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comments. It looks like Claire raised her hand again.
Yes, I would like to address that comment. Yes, it's true. Woods are very important, especially old growth forest, which we do not have here in Westwood. If you're talking about habitat, woods are important. Habitats can and ecosystems can coexist with solar arrays, with ground mounted arrays. They might be different, a different ecosystem, but they do support ecosystems that are beneficial. It's critically important that we reduce our use of fossil fuels to create electricity, because that is destroying our woods from the other side. That's the emissions that are going into the atmosphere and changing our climate are doing far more harm to our wooded areas than cutting down some trees and putting in solar. Solar panels generate a whole lot more or displace a whole lot more carbon dioxide than a young forest, which is mostly what we have here in Westwood. So it's at this point, we've waited so long to put out, to expand our solar and renewable capacity that we've really boxed ourselves into a corner. It's absolutely critical that we develop this type of energy system so we can close down the current fossil fuel plants that are spewing thousands and millions of tons of both greenhouse gases and other horrible pollutants that are causing asthma and other lung diseases in the neighborhoods where they're generated. So this, the bylaw proposal also limits the amount that you can put on your property to half of, you're only allowed to build on half of the property without going to a planning board, if I understand it correctly. That's considered a larger principal use has to cover more than half of the property in order to trigger a planning board hearing. So so that's what I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you. And it looks like Donna Morrison has raised her hand again, and I encourage discussion. I just don't want to do this for another half an hour of just back and forth of points of solar positive and negative or whatever, but I do want to encourage discussion amongst residents. So, Ms. Morrison?
Thank you. And just to include also in the bylaw how people need to dispose of damaged solar panels, because they are very destructive to the environment, and also the fact that they have to be handled in a very specific manner. It's not something that you can just throw out in your trash.
I believe, Abby, we have protocols for disposal, right? Do we not have procedures? Abandonment of a solar array?
In our draft proposal, we have in a section on that, in the principal use ones or the large scale ones that come to the planning board, but we don't have anything specific related to the small residential ones.
The disposal of these? If they
No,
were to
not the
remove-
disposal, but we talk about if it were to be abandoned and decommissioned, that you can ask for a performance bond if it were a principal use somewhere.
Oh, okay.
That really needs to be considered, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Kate LaCroix typed, bravo, Claire, I wholeheartedly agree. And Claire just typed a Q&A. Solar companies require the return of panels. This is also putting solar arrays to a higher standard than other structures like swimming pools. So I think that's it for now for Article 2 for public comment period, unless someone types in another question quickly. Any board members with final thoughts for tonight anyway on solar zoning article? Okay, I don't see any other questions from the public, so we'll move on to Article, what are we up to, 3? All right, we're rolling now. Article 3.
Article 3, this is the proposal related to the historic rehab of the Obed Baker House. If you recall, the town has several times before, I think 5 or 6 times, put out an RFP for the adaptive reuse of this historic, it's known as the Obed Baker House. That's located on town property at 909 High Street. That's a red building in the photograph on your screen. The town put out an RFP. We did get a response from Todd Sullivan, who I believe is here tonight if anyone has any questions. And at the recent select board meeting, the select board did give Mr. Sullivan the opportunity to move forward with his RFP, which means he's going to be working on some plans to work on submitting a full proposal that would go through the review process, special permit process with you, the planning board, would also require going to the Conservation Commission. And as part of that, the proposal includes a small addition on the back of the Obed Baker House to allow 2 residences at within the historic building, and then also a proposal for a new 1-story commercial building to the right of the Obed Baker House. So if you're looking at the house right now, it would be on the town land to the right of that house. So with this application, what's proposed right now before you is a zoning change to expand the flexible multiple use overlay district to this property, to both these property, or to a couple of these properties. So it would be the High Street, 909 High Street with the Obed Baker House. That because that FMUOD allows the mixed use, so residential also with commercial on the same property. So next door, the property is owned SRC, which is a single family residence that would change to local business A and the proposed overlay district. And the proposed zoning also includes expanding the FMUOD overlay district to the adjacent commercial plaza to the left, which contains the Dunkin' Donuts and some of the restaurants next door. There is no development proposal for the commercial plaza. However, the property owner there was recently before you. They had also taken a look at the RFP and they were interested in having this additional zoning opportunity to expand the zoning here. That way they could consider additional redevelopment opportunities in the future, but none are proposed right now. So what you see on your screen is in the middle here, the existing zoning. This is the Obed Baker House right here, the red building. This lot to the right is proposed to change to the local business A, the green zone. And then also this right now is currently the driveway, and then it leads the property back here is the Westwood Cemetery. The proposal would be to also expand the zone over this little portion of the land. So it'd all be in the local business and then the overlay district over these three and a portion of this parcel. So it would look like this on your right. And the initial RFP that was submitted shows a small addition on the back of the Obed Baker house with some parking beside, parking behind, and a new one-story building here to the right with access to the driveway between here and the commercial plaza. So that's it for this article right now. It would, involve a zoning map amendment and updating the section 9.5 of the zoning bylaw to include these additional properties. Do you have any additional board questions or comments?
Yeah, any comments or questions from board members for what have you? Yes, Ellen.
Not necessarily directly related to how we zone this, but it's nice to see the initial plan, and I'm just curious. It's hard to read from that screenshot. How close to the wetlands buffer will that new building be?
This is Nora. I can answer that. The plans will have it outside of the 35-foot no-touch zone. So it'll be close to that, but outside of it. The Conservation Commission will have to review the plans, and they don't allow any development within 35 feet of the wetlands.
Awesome, thank you. Piggybacking on that question, is there any plan to kind of address those wetlands? And they're kind of covered in invasives. And I don't know if that's outside of the scope of the RFP, but since we're talking about doing something with that untouched piece of land, is there any consideration to doing something, to improve the state of the wetlands and their health?
Yes, that's actually part of the proposal. So I don't know if the board wants to hear from Todd Sullivan. He is in the attendees. If you'd like to hear from him, he can explain it a little bit better than I can probably, but the proposal does involve cleaning up the wetlands, removing not only the invasives, but quite a bit of trash that's been gathered there over the years.
That is great to hear. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions by board members or comments? Okay. Let's see if we have anyone. Todd, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, not really. It's a four-phase project. One would be to renovate and add to the existing Obed Baker building. The next phase would be to build a new commercial building that's alongside of the wetland. And we'd have to rebuild the existing cemetery shed that's on the property behind the Mackenzie property to accommodate the excavators and whatnot, the cemetery equipment. And the fourth phase, to answer your question, Ellen, would be to clean up the bordering vegetated wetland, which is in pretty rough shape. This whole parcel is pre-disturbed land. So it's none of it is really virgin woods or anything like that. It was, I think it was the fill that was used when Manhattan Street and High Street was when 109 was redeveloped. So, yeah, the bordering vegetated wetland is definitely going to be cleaned up. All the invasives removed. There's a lot of trash in there. I don't know, people dump washing machines, his old garage door open. It's loaded with junk. So, and Westwood's got town wells, so that's going to be a needed improvement.
Okay, well, thank you. Give public comment time to generate. Don't see any Q&As. Barbara Shea has just raised her hand.
Thank
Hello?
you.
Hi.
Forgot to click the button. So that land between the two lots is the driveway into the cemetery land behind. So is there a contemplated easement or some melding of the two lots in adding this overlay district? And is there anything to be concerned about with the existing, isn't there a garage right behind that building that's town owned on the lot where the Obed Baker house is? Is that what Todd was talking about, rebuilding? That's a newish building there, right?
So there's a cemetery barn that is behind the Obed Baker house, and that would be replaced with a new cemetery structure on the cemetery property. That barn would be torn down. That was built about 12 years ago, I believe. Might have been a little bit more than that. But it's not as useful to the cemetery department as the new structure that Todd would build them would be. And then that driveway is actually the driveway out of the cemetery, but it's also the driveway into the Obed Baker house and the cemetery barn. So it would be continued to be used in the same manner it is now. It would be used to access the properties that are already there and used as an egress from the cemetery.
So two more questions. Would there be a way to make safer ingress and egress for the Dunkin' Donuts and accommodate parking for these structures Todd is talking about? Are you making a two-family out of the 909 and then adding a commercial building next to it and the attendant increase in traffic and that treacherous curve on 109? Is that all being contemplated in this construction?
It is. So the planning board will have to review the application for a special permit in order to complete the development. So what's been contemplated to this point is just a proposal to a request for proposals and the designation of Todd as the designated developer of the land. He still has to submit a proposal for an FMUOD special permit, and the planning board have to review that. So they would review traffic issues at that time. The thought is that the entrance and exit would remain on the road where it is now and not be brought further east or north on the property, which would be more dangerous because it would be closer to that curve. So the idea is to keep it as far away as possible. The development of the potential redevelopment of the Dunkin' Donuts Plaza would also have to be reviewed by the planning board if that property owner wanted to come forward with an FMUOD project. And if that ever happens, I imagine that the point of exit and entrance from that property would be a concern of the planning board, and they would want to redesign it in a way that brings that exit as far west as possible.
Is that owner, thank you, Nora, is that owner contemplating cooperating with the development of the 909 parcel to maybe benefit both? Is that why he wanted to be included in the new overlay district, do you think? Besides whatever future development, obviously. But is that something that he'd cooperate with, allowing whatever Todd's doing to exit further down?
That's not part of the current proposal. Whether that evolves over time or not remains to be seen. But the current proposal that the select board approved to go forward in the process shows Todd's property independent from the adjacent property.
Okay, great. Good luck with it, Todd. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Barbara. Let's wait a few moments and see if anyone else raises their hand or types a question. Okay, I'm not seeing any additional comments or questions. So before we move on, last chance for board members. Just want to give everyone a chance to speak. Okay, we'll revisit this in a couple of weeks. Abby, what's next? What are we on, 4?
So the fourth article, this has to do with the section of the zoning bylaw where it currently, section 4.53 requires any applicants that are looking to alter or expand a non-conforming property. Right now, if there's a new non-conformance or expansion of one proposed, then they have to get a variance with the Zoning Board of Appeals. If you recall, in 2017, we had kind of added this new section to the zoning bylaw. It used to all be through special permit from the zoning board. In 2017, we had made it harder for properties to expand if they were becoming more non-compliant, which means if they were in violation of a required minimum setback, if they were currently the bylaw is written, if a property is not in compliance with all the dimensional requirements, it's considered non-conforming. It used to be any alteration could be done through the special permit process. Then in 2017, if you were making it more non-compliant, for example, if you went encroaching further into the setback, we changed it in 2017 to be a variance with the zoning board, which is a much harder application process. There are much higher bar to get approval from the zoning board. So we had made that change in 2017. However, staff has recently been reviewing some case law history and some cases that have come out in response to this. We've taken a more careful look at it, and this section of the zoning bylaw cases have said that there should be more flexibility for properties, structures that are currently non-conforming, to have more flexibility to go the special permit path if they are minor changes, not just any change has to be a variance. So right now, this zoning article proposes language to section 4.53 to have it be reviewed when the application comes in by the building commissioner to make a determination if it's a minor change that is not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. If it's not more detrimental, then it could go the special permit route from the zoning board. If it is more substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood, it's considered a major change, and that would still be a variance with the zoning board of appeals. Both are a public hearing process with notification to abutters, but there are more strict requirements that have to be presented and approved by the zoning board to get a variance. So essentially what this article is doing is allowing some more flexibility for minor changes to go through the special permit process rather than the variance process, and it's to be determined by the building commissioner when applications come in. If board members have any questions on that, you have the draft language in front of you. Or in here on the slide, the changes are shown in red.
If I could ask Mr. Ahern, you had talked about trying to come up with definitions of what more detrimental is so that the building inspector has a defendable position. Has that gained any ground, or have we moved forward on
I don't know that it's gained any ground, but it's certainly under discussion.
Okay.
I've spoken to the building commissioner about it. I believe he understands the need for it, and I don't believe he's done that yet, and nor do I think he should in consideration necessarily for this article. And so I think it's something he needs to do so that he can defend his position when he says special permit or variance later on.
I just remember it being a talking point last time we met, so I just thought I'd bring it up again just to see if anything is advanced. Any comments or questions from planning board members about this article before we go to public comment?
Oh, you asked my question, Chris. I appreciate it.
Oh, Sure. Didn't mean to jump the gun there for
No,
you.
no, it was great. Thank you.
We do have one member and attendee, Brian Clinton, has his hand raised. Hello, sir.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you.
Good. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this. Also
Could
want to
you
thank.
just state your name and
Oh,
address, please?
Sorry, my name is Brian Clinton. I'm a resident of 44 Baker Street in Westwood, otherwise known as the Maze neighborhood.
Okay.
I wanted to speak on this because last fall, well, first of all, I wanted to thank Nora and the staff for bringing this to my family's attention. Last fall, we applied for a variance because my mother-in-law lives with us not by choice. She lives with us because she had a stroke in our house in 2018. We're very fortunate to have space to accommodate her needs. She's worked very hard to regain her independence. However, the way my house in the Maze is situated is such that she has to use to exit her portion of my house, and it's not an accessory apartment. She needs to come through my house. She's a young woman, only 67 years of age. My wife's an only daughter, so responsibility is falling on her to, help mom out, of course, because she can't live independently necessarily. We applied to put a exclusive porch, it would be exclusive for her use on our property. We're on the corner of Church and I'm not trying to give you a sob story, but I want you to hear the whole story because I think it's very important for the planning board to hear about this because I really think that the town was subject to a lawsuit, particularly with regard to disability. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to go down that avenue. But getting back to the point, we proposed to put a porch so that she could exit from her side of the house, come out on her side, come across the front of my house, and go down to the driveway. Now, her driver, the guy that she has that drives her, picked her up and took her on an appointment today. She wants to have that independence. She doesn't want to have to walk through my kitchen and my living room and disrupt me and or my daughter. She just wants to go about her life. And we were granted a special permit, thank you to the town, but we were denied a variance for 2 feet. My argument, I just want to say, I think zoning and planning needs to be used as a tool. And the zoning process seems like such a weapon. And no common sense is applied because people want to, rigorously enforce the law or the zoning, chapter 40, whatever it was. But, there needs to be, some common sense and the board. And I think that the commissioner should have discretion to grant these, particularly with my house, because we renovated it in 2015, but we stayed on the existing foundation. So it was a pre-existing structure. Meanwhile, I have a rear yard with it, 48 feet. So I have an additional 18 feet in the back, but, I'm 2 feet short to a front yard for an uncovered porch. I mean, not living space. I'm not trying to create an accessory apartment. I just want you to know, I think this is such common sense. So many people in Westwood in different neighborhoods will benefit from this. I'm a realtor. I don't think that, I talked to Nora about this. I hate to see you call it a special permit. I'm not against people making money, and I understand laws and legal things, but it's pretty sad that a resident is a developer and a flipper can get the same type of quote unquote special permit in town to benefit financially when a family with 3 children, mother-in-law living with them, can't get an extra 2 feet to do something to improve her quality of life. So this is a very common sense amendment. I didn't even know it changed in 2017 since I've lived here in Westwood, but I just want to encourage you all to really take a look at this and push this forward because there is a real benefit to people. And we all know families that are, because of the cost of housing and stuff like that, more elderly people are moving in with their kids and stuff like that. And I'm not asking, for anything special. I'm not trying to give you a sob story. I'm just trying to talk to you about, common sense. And again, applying planning and zoning in a tool-like manner, as opposed to, a draconian kind of like weapon. And, you feel like you're at the mercy of, three people who respectfully, I think they understand zoning, but I don't think they understand the whole, process, if you will, and of what's going on in people's lives and how, zoning can be applied to help them and not hurt them. And that's all I have to say. I appreciate your time. Thank you for listening to me. I'm going to continue on following this process through the next steps all the way to town meeting. And I hope this planning board can get behind this amendment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Barbara Shea has her hand up.
Sorry to keep chiming in, but I sympathize with Brian's situation, but my comment was just that it sounds like reading this, that Joe Doyle's office gets a little more discretion, which sounds great. And you were wondering about creating some parameters for him, maybe. Will there still be a notice of neighbors that has to be done? I know a variance is a much higher bar, and I think reducing small extensions of non-conformance to the possibility of it just being a special permit sounds like a great idea, because somebody wants to put a porch on the front of their house and they're 38 feet back instead of 40 feet back. I don't think either of their neighbors or any of the 3 or 4 neighbors around the house would really mind. And if through this amendment, the building department gets the discretion to say, oh, nobody else minds, why should we care? You're making your house look better and your neighbors don't mind, go ahead and do it, rather than having to go through that extra bar and the additional punitive level of scrutiny that Brian was referencing. That's the intent of this. I'm just checking.
Abby, if currently notice would be given by the Zoning Board of Appeals, right?
Right.
If we take that out of their hands, do we have a way to do that?
This wouldn't be coming out of, sorry.
Sorry, this would still be before the Zoning Board of Appeals. It would be before them as a special permit, as opposed to a zoning, as opposed to a variance.
Okay.
And the special permit notice requirements are exactly the same as the variance notice requirements. It's to everyone within 300 feet of the subject property.
But am I right that a special permit is a lower bar to have to reach, right?
Yes.
Correct. For a special permit, you still have to prove that there's no detrimental effect to the neighborhood, but you don't have to prove that there's something unique about the property related to the soil or topography or shape of the lot that gets you to the point of being qualified to receive a variance. That step is not needed for a special permit.
So this amendment might have made it easier for Brian to get what he wanted back last fall, potentially, and other people who've maybe gotten shot down on something that their neighbors might not have minded if this.
It alters the process, so you could look at it either way. Every case is going to be specific, and it would be, like we said, subject to the building commissioner's discretion. So we couldn't say one way or the other if it would have made it easier or not. We don't know the specifics of the situation.
So what was the point of this then? I don't get why this is being proposed if it isn't to make it easier or better or in some way clearer.
Well, I was just saying, sorry.
To comply with current case law.
Okay.
Which ostensibly is the intent to not be so draconian, as Mr. Clinton put it. So they're basically saying that the way it was being operated in the past was a violation of the property owner's rights. And so we're making it in compliance with how the state has deemed.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
Okay. It looks like Mr. Clinton has raised his hand again.
All right, I know I did this in a past life, so I don't want to keep you guys all night. I just, for the purposes of this meeting, just to understand what we were doing, if you know, obviously, there's a lot of people on this call that have been in this community a lot longer than me, but for me, my next door neighbor's side yard is technically would have been closer to the street, Baker Street, than mine, with the porch. And that's when we talk about de minimis and impacts. We had all our neighbors supporting, and I just want to help people kind of understand, like, his house protrudes, his is technically a side yard, but mine is a front yard. So that's why, I think the discretion of the building commissioner, should come into play and be utilized. And I just want to let you know, I would certainly get behind, if this gets advances, to town meeting and so on and so forth, I'd get behind also putting, parameters in place to, quote unquote, check the authority, if you will, of the building commissioner. And again, that's all I have to say tonight. I just wanted to kind of lay it out for you a little bit more. Thank you so much. Have a nice night.
Right. Thank you. Yes, Tom.
It should be important to note that if the building inspector is given the discretion to decide whether a variance or a special permit is needed, then that doesn't give the property owner the right to do what they want. They still have to get the special permit or the variance, and the appellate rights of the abutters are still there.
That's correct.
Yeah, the only thing that's changing is how you get into the project. It's by variance or special permit. Those things are still in place. We're just taking away that it's always going to be a variance.
Exactly.
Yes, Ellen.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Tom. That's actually a really good and really salient point to point out, so that the people that are looking at this keep that in mind. It doesn't turn it into a free-for-all. I want to thank Mr. Clinton for calling in, because I appreciate his perspective. I had been looking at this and thinking of this in terms of what I recall the original intent of changing the bylaw was, which was more in terms of tear downs and rebuilds rather than necessarily trying to negatively, impact residents who are trying to make improvements to their homes. So that to frame it in that sense and to remember that perspective, and that there was fallout for residents and not just in terms of full tear downs and rebuilds and larger homes popping up on smaller lots. That's really helpful. And I think that's a really important perspective to keep in mind as we continue to discuss this. It's not just about bringing us in compliance with the law, that there have been impacts to some of our residents that may not have been intended when this was changed initially. So I'm grateful for that perspective, and it's reframing how I look at moving forward with this.
All right, thank you. Donna Morrison has raised her hand.
Thank you, Donna Morrison, 303 Oak Street. Thank you. Ellen, I was just going to make that point that that without this amendment, it would be easier for a person to tear down their current house and do a rebuild to a monstrosity in the neighborhood that would be under compliance, and really get a home that that they may not like, that they hadn't lived in for years. So that I really would encourage you to just keep that into consideration to let people live in their homes and just facilitate it. And especially not only people that have maybe parents moving in with them, but their children cannot buy homes in this town anymore and are moving home with them as well. Their children cannot afford the apartments that are in this town anymore and are moving into their homes with them. So that add-ons are going to be much more the future as well. Well, again, thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, I don't see any other questions in the Q&A, and I don't see anyone with their hand raised. Any other final comments before we move on tonight from board members? Okay, Abby, let's move on. Number 5, is that where we?
Yes. Your fifth zoning article is a zoning map amendment to at 394 and 396 Providence Highway. There is an existing Shell station with the convenience store located on Providence Highway. Right now, this property is currently in the industrial office zoning district. This proposal is to change this to the highway business zone and also expand zoning district to this parcel next door, which is 396 Providence Highway. We were approached by the owner that is looking to renovate the property for a new gas station and retail store, similar to the one on the other side of Route 1, closer to Dedham. Right now, the gas station is there currently. However, the use is not permitted in the underlying, in the current zoning district. So this proposal is to make the use a conforming use. It's already there. It's just non-conforming, but changing the zoning to highway business where light motor vehicle use is an allowed use. And then, if you can see here, this is the current zoning on the left picture. The orange is the industrial office. This lot next door at 396 currently doesn't have the zoning designation. It was formerly part of the state's right-of-way that has since been acquired by the owner here and would like to use this property within further development. So the proposal is changing the zoning district highway business and also expanding the overlay districts as well, which is the wireless communications overlay and the FMUOD flexible multiple use overlay district to both parcels. The owner is here tonight also in the audience. If you have any questions for them, essentially what the zoning change would allow this project to come forward. A full application would still be needed to be submitted to you, as well as the use requires a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So the zoning change would allow that project to move forward in the application process.
All right, thank you. Questions, comments from board members? Okay. Looks like Michael Brown has, I didn't see his hand go up, but.
Right now, I'm just off. I let him in case he has any questions. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, board members. I think Abby really summed it up very well. We know that this project as planned will require another meeting before this board, as well as an application to obtain special permits from the zoning board. But first and foremost, we would like to have these two parcels redesignated, or in the case of one parcel redesignated, and in the case of the other parcel given a new designation, both for highway business, which would bring this use into compliance with the zoning bylaw.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant, or not the applicant, but the Mr. Brown, I'll say. Okay. I see Barbara Shea has raised her hand. Hello.
I'm surprised that that corner parcel had no zoning designation before. That's kind of strange. But I wonder, it sounds a little like spot zoning, which I know the town isn't excited about doing generally. But I know also that there's wetlands behind there and residential behind the wetlands. And then further down Route 1 heading north is the Lambert's Plaza, which is also a pre-existing non-conforming use that maybe now is not the time to take it up. But back in the day when I used to come to all the planning board meetings before any of you were there all the time, besides maybe Dave, there was talk of possibly rezoning that. Is that something that should be considered comprehensively since you're along Route 1 there changing things, or am I opening up an unnecessary can of worms?
We did try to make that change like 7 or 8 years ago, I think. Didn't we, Nora?
Yes, in 2015, the planning board did support the citizen petition to rezone that. It did not pass the town meeting in 2015.
Okay, with Lambert's. But so on this corner, obviously that besides any zoning requirements that also have to meet the thresholds for conservation with any redevelopment.
It'd be a full application of a special permit.
I wonder how it was industrial anyway, that one little parcel where the gas station is. I thought that was only up.
Was
on
that state owned?
It's industrial office on that side of, in that little area and behind there. I can pull up the map again, but highway business is on the other side of Route 1. So the car dealerships are directly across the street from this property. They are also in the highway business. So this corner, and then it goes back to Walpole Street, is the industrial office side. And the reason that parcel on the corner wasn't zoned is because it used to be part of the state right of way, and roads just aren't roads, and their right of way don't usually have zoning designations.
Great. Well, good luck. It'll be nice to have a new gas station and convenience store is what I'm assuming he's looking to do on that corner.
That's correct, yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Brown? All right. I don't see any other questions from attendees, so we will move on and discuss that at, I guess, greater length in a couple of weeks, right, Abby?
Yeah.
And then we're at Article 6, housekeeping.
All right, and the last article, Article 6, is housekeeping. It's a standard placeholder that we put in the each year. This is really just to correct any errors or typos that we found, and I found a couple. I noticed at the beginning of our bylaw, Section 3, where we reference our zoning map, there was a couple overlay districts that just weren't in the list of all of our overlay districts. They're in the bylaw, they're on the map, they just weren't spelled out. So I've added those, this article proposes adding these two sort of recent ones in. And then also, last year, if you remember, we changed the term office of a doctor or dentist to office of a healthcare professional, but it wasn't updated in the parking section. And then the numbering was incorrect under home occupations. The numbers didn't carry all the way through. So this proposes correcting those numbers. That's all I found so far.
It could be a full-time job editing our bylaws just for typos alone. That's not a comment of anyone who wrote them before. Just there's so much verbiage for a small town. I noticed in a couple of occasions tonight, some people who were calling in or commenting, it seemed like they were trying to get our support on these articles. And it almost seems like we need to make it clear these articles originate with us and they're moving forward with our support. So we've discussed them at length, and now we're starting this public process. But these articles are from the planning board, so they have our support. We're trying to get townwide support for these articles. A couple people made a comments that made it sound like they were trying to get us to support these. So maybe I misread it, but I just felt like I needed to say that. Abby, this is a new slide.
Right. I wanted to let people know, because we had sent out the public hearing notice to a few places, so that's why we've had some people in the audience. But this is our, the planning board's public hearing. Yep, you're proposing these zoning articles. You have another meeting before you go to the FinCom. So the Finance and Warrant Commission, they begin their public hearings on Tuesday, March 1st. If they don't finish in one night, their hearing will be March 2nd. This is when the planning board goes and presents your recommendation to the Finance and Warrant Commission. They will also continue all their articles, their hearing to the end of March 29th. That's where you also give any final recommendations on your articles, and they will then vote to make a recommendation on all town meeting warrant articles, and then the town meeting vote will be on Monday, May 2nd. So this is just updating people. This is the first public hearing, and they will continue over the next couple months until May 2nd. And if anyone is looking to follow along, the best way to stay informed is to sign up on the town's website. If you go to the homepage, there's a notify me button, and you can get an email every time a public meeting is posted. So I'd encourage people to sign up to receive those meeting notifications.
Okay, thank you. So we're done with zoning amendment discussion. Next, other business, draft minutes.
Or first, you should vote
just-
to continue to your
Oh, I
next meeting on
apologize. Thank you.
Tuesday, February 15th at 7 o'clock on Zoom.
I move that we continue this public hearing to that date and time on Zoom.
Second.
Any further discussion? Take a roll call vote. Ellen?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Tom?
All right.
Dave?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. So those hearings are all continued till February 15th. Yes, Kate?
I just wanted to say to Abby, I really like the slides. They were very simple and easy to understand. I thought they were really well done.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for all your work, Abby, and all of this preparation. It's not a small amount of work, that's for sure. Okay, so now draft minutes. Anyone have a chance to read, make amendments, any changes, or do we have a motion to adopt the minutes as submitted?
I read them and had no comments, so I'd make a motion to adopt them as submitted.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt the minutes. Any further discussion? Actually, we didn't identify the date of the minutes in the motion, so it's for January 11th.
Thank you. The minutes.
Sorry.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Okay, thank you. We have motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Kate?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Ellen?
Aye.
Aye.
And Tom?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. You jumped the gun there, Tom. Okay. We do have the conflict of interest law for municipal employees for those who, is it appropriate for everyone at this point in time, or is it every other year? I can't remember.
Every 2 years for the online training, but every year you have to, you're supposed to acknowledge that you received the conflict of interest law.
Okay.
And then Chris, if we skipped over number 3 on the agenda, I had put in there about the draft guidelines for the MBTA communities. I put that as an agenda item. There is we discussed it earlier a little bit in our public hearing, but the state is accepting public comments until the end of March, to March 31st. I want to let you know that we are scheduled to, present the draft guidelines to the select board at their meeting next week on Monday, the 7th. And they'll give us some comments. It may take them, next week, or it may take them to their next meeting as well. So I would like to start compiling comments that we could work on, a draft submission that we'd want to make sure we submit in March before the deadline from Westwood. So if board members want to take another look and let me know if you have any comments, you could send them to me directly, and I can start compiling a memo that would come from the planning board. I know I've heard comments about the overall reasonable size, the requirement for the contiguous acres, questioning the bus service community. I heard tonight, see about, getting, advocating for a commuter rail service community designation. So if you think of any others, let me know. And at your next couple of meetings, I can start pulling together a draft memo that you can review.
Great, thank you for doing all of that. So if anyone has any further comments that Abby you'd like Abby to submit to the state relevant to all the discussions tonight, the multifamily discussions, please do that as soon as you can. Anything else, Abby?
Nope.
Nope. All right, anything from board members you'd like to talk about, comment on? Just want to go home. I just want to go to bed or something. All right. So given that we've done everything we came to do, I'll hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote. Dave?
Aye.
Tom?
Okay. Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Ellen?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for the attendees who are here. Barbara Peterson actually just said thank you and good night. So I thought I'd read that just for clarity and completeness. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you February 15th.